I'm Elon Musk, and when people talk about the controversy around my social media posts, they often imagine a simple story of recklessness or ego, but from inside my own head, it has always felt more complicated, more human, and frankly, more flawed than the headlines suggest. Because I grew up thinking out loud, questioning everything, and pushing boundaries. And when the internet handed me a megaphone that reached hundreds of millions of people, I didn't immediately recalibrate the way most executives are trained to speak. I spoke the way I always had, bluntly, impulsively, sometimes joking, sometimes provocative, sometimes deeply serious. And I underestimated how every word would be parsed, screenshot, quoted out of context, and weaponized. Especially when the expectations placed on me shifted from engineer and entrepreneur to symbol, market mover, and cultural lightning rod. And I'll admit there were moments when I crossed lines, when humor didn't land, when sarcasm read as cruelty, when frustration came out as dismissal, and when curiosity sounded like endorsement, and the backlash that followed was intense. Not just criticism, but waves of outrage. Boycotts, advertisers pulling back, employees questioning leadership, regulators watching more closely, and strangers telling me what kind of person I was based on 280 characters. And there were nights when I stared at my phone, wondering whether the cost of unfiltered expression was worth it. Whether I should retreat into silence or hand my voice over to a PR team that would sand down every edge until nothing sharp or authentic remained. But part of me resisted that because I believe progress comes from friction, from uncomfortable conversations, from saying things that challenge consensus, even though I've learned the hard way that intent doesn't erase impact, and that being technically correct or joking in my own mind doesn't mean the audience experiences it the same way, especially in a world already polarized and primed for outrage. And I've also had to confront the reality that power changes the meaning of speech, that when I tweet something, it's not just an idea floating into the void. It can move markets, affect livelihoods, embolden some people, and alienate others. And with that reach comes responsibility, whether I like it or not. And the accusations of being inappropriate, insensitive, or reckless forced me to slow down at times, to ask myself whether I was contributing to understanding or simply feeding the fire. And I won't pretend I've handled that perfectly because I haven't. And there are posts I would rewrite or never send at all if given the chance. But there's also a frustration I carry about how nuance gets lost, how complex thoughts are flattened into scandal, how apologies are dismissed as weakness and defiance is framed as arrogance. And through all of this, I've had to develop a thicker skin while still trying to keep a thin enough one to learn, because shutting out criticism entirely is just as dangerous as being paralyzed by it. And so this story, my story, isn't about a villain or hero arc. It's about a person navigating an unprecedented level of visibility in real time, making mistakes in public, absorbing backlash that sometimes feels deserved and sometimes feels performative, and continuing to wrestle with the question of how to speak honestly in a world that demands both authenticity and restraint. Knowing that every post is a choice, and every choice carries consequences far beyond the screen. And as the backlash kept evolving, I realized it wasn't just about individual posts anymore. It was about the narrative that had formed around me, the idea that I was careless by default, that every tweet was a calculated provocation or a sign of instability, when in reality a lot of it came from exhaustion, from running multiple companies at once, from sleeping on factory floors, from feeling the weight of expectations while still trying to retain some sense of humor and freedom. And I began to notice how quickly people assign intent, how a single sentence can erase years of work in their minds, and how outrage often spreads faster than clarification ever could. And there were moments when I pushed back publicly, sometimes too aggressively, because I didn't want to normalize the idea that public pressure should dictate every thought I express, but that resistance itself became part of the controversy, feeding the cycle of screenshots, reaction videos, think pieces, and calls for accountability. And I had to confront an uncomfortable truth that even if I see myself as someone questioning norms, others see me as someone punching down or being dismissive, and perception, whether fair or not, has real consequences, especially when employees, users, and entire communities feel affected by what I say. And I learned that silence can be interpreted as indifference, while speaking can be interpreted as hostility. And there's no perfect equilibrium in that space. Only trade-offs, and yet I still believe open discourse matters, even when it's messy, even when it costs you, because a world where leaders are reduced to sanitized statements, crafted by committees, feels sterile and dishonest. But at the same time, I've come to understand that authenticity without empathy is just noise, and that being provocative for the sake of provocation doesn't move humanity forward. It just deepens trenches. And so I've had to sit with the contradictions, wanting to challenge censorship while being accused of enabling harm, wanting free speech while being told my words carry disproportionate power, wanting to joke like a regular person while being reminded that I'm no longer perceived as one. And through all of this, I've faced the reality that growth isn't about never making mistakes. It's about recognizing patterns, adjusting course, and accepting responsibility without losing your core. And this ongoing controversy has forced me to reflect not just on what I say, but why I say it, who it serves, and whether it aligns with the future I claim to be building. Because if I'm serious about pushing humanity forward, then my words, not just my technology, have to evolve too, even when that evolution is uncomfortable, public, and imperfect. And what surprised me most as this all continued was how personal it became, how strangers spoke with absolute certainty about my character, my intentions, even my mental state, based solely on fragments of text. And I had to remind myself repeatedly that the internet isn't a courtroom or a lab, it's an amplifier, and subtlety doesn't survive amplification. And there were times I leaned into that chaos instead of stepping back from it, partly out of stubbornness, partly out of a belief that retreat would validate every accusation, and partly because I genuinely struggle with the idea that innovation should require conformity of thought. But the cost of that resistance showed up in ways I couldn't ignore, in strained relationships, in employees feeling caught between defending a mission they believe in and distancing themselves from statements they didn't agree with, in advertisers and partners reacting not to what I was building, but to what I had posted the night before. And it forced me to acknowledge that leadership in the modern world isn't just about vision or execution. It's also about emotional intelligence at scale, something no engineering textbook ever taught me. And I started to see how social media rewards immediacy over reflection, how it nudges you to respond instead of absorb, to win the moment instead of considering the long arc. And I don't always resist that pull as well as I should, because like anyone else, I'm human, reactive, sometimes defensive, sometimes tired, and sometimes amused by pushing back against what feels like hypocrisy or selective outrage. But I've learned that being right in your own mind doesn't equal being effective, and that sometimes restraint is not surrender, but strategy. And yet, even now, I refuse to fully surrender my voice, because I believe the world needs people who are willing to speak imperfectly, to question loudly, to expose the cracks in consensus, even if that means taking hits along the way. And the challenge I continue to wrestle with is how to do that without becoming the very distraction critics accuse me of being, how to ensure that my presence online supports the missions I care about instead of overshadowing them. And I won't claim I've solved that equation, because it keeps changing as platforms evolve, audiences shift, and expectations tighten. But what I do know is that this controversy has stripped away any illusion that influence can be separated from responsibility, and it's forced me to confront myself in ways success never did, to balance defiance with humility, conviction with listening, and freedom with accountability. And whether people see that growth or dismiss it entirely is ultimately out of my control. But the story doesn't end with a single post or backlash cycle. It continues every time I open the app, pause before typing, and decide whether the thought in my head is worth the ripple it's about to create.